Welcome, everyone. I'm Lauren. I'm with the marketing team at Simon Data. Really excited to have you all here for our webinar. Today, we'll be talking about how to unlock the full potential of your Snowflake data using a composable CDP. Matt will dive into some of the composable data strategies that we're using, some of the architecture, and how everything works together to make sure that you are delivering the experience that the marketing team and customers and data teams all crave. So great. Matt, I would like to introduce you. You are our CTO and co-founder of Simon Data and an expert in all things data when it comes to composability, Snowflake, and Simon. So take it away.
Great. Thank you, Lauren. I'm going to share my screen here. All right. Yeah, so to kick things off, I really want to actually situate the content that we're going to talk through today in sort of the broader foundations of Simon in general. And really, I think we believe that there's three legs of the stool when it comes to empowering non-technical users to deliver high-value data-driven use cases. It really starts off with a solid foundation and a composable data strategy, which is most accessible by utilizing a composable customer data platform on top of a cloud data warehouse. And that's really where we're going to focus today, asking how we can unlock the full potential of your Snowflake data. But it also requires underpinning your data applications using a framework I call data reactive marketing. And I'm not going to go into it in detail today, but essentially it's a principled framework for how data-driven marketing campaigns work. And then that represents a target that you can use for generative methods to help users produce campaigns that utilize data effectively. And then lastly, of course, these two components can be combined using artificial intelligence and machine learning in order to guide non-technical users to the highest valued campaigns. But today, I'm going to focus on data composability. So let me go ahead and set the stage. Your organization has likely made significant investments in decentralizing your data, utilizing a cloud data warehouse like Snowflake. However, the value you're getting from the investment can feel uneven. In some areas like analytics, the benefits are immediate and clear. Your analysts are more productive than ever with access to more data than they had before. They're eager to leverage Snowflake's powerful capabilities to push your business intelligence efforts further. But in other areas like marketing, there's a noticeable gap in value generation. The MarTech team is grappling with integration issues that vary across the different marketing tools that your organization uses. And although your marketing team has adopted best-of-breed tools for various channels and use cases, the tools are difficult to operate and they lack consistent access to data and represent a wealth of untapped potential, especially if you could only publish consistent profiles, segmentation, and personalization into each one. Furthermore, your data centralization journey is still ongoing. While you've made quick progress in bringing your core business data into the warehouse, there's still a significant amount of dark data out there. And that includes data that represents how your brand communicates with the market and how your current and prospective customers engage with your marketing efforts. So your analysts and data scientists are eager for higher quality features to plug into their models, helping to optimize the entire system. So the discussion today is going to offer you hopefully a new perspective on these challenges and provide you with a framework and tools to unlock the full potential of your Snowflake data. To do that, we're going to explore adopting a composable data strategy, define what the strategy entails, compare it with a traditional data strategy, and highlight the key concepts that will set you up for downstream success. Then we're going to dive into the concept of data composability itself, which is going to be our central framework and mechanism for unlocking the full value of data investments. And then finally, we're going to talk about how Simon specifically implements this framework. So let's get started by diving into what it means to adopt a composable data strategy. A traditional data strategy is centered on how to centralize and manage your data. It establishes critical best practices around governance, architecture, management, and quality, but it's focused primarily on the process of getting your data into a central location and places less emphasis on how your organization will unlock value from the data once it's centralized. In contrast, a composable data strategy is driven by what you're going to do with the data. The primary goal of creating and modeling data is to power downstream applications. While you likely have a clear understanding of your analytical and predictive use cases, the data needs for CDP use cases like retention and marketing or acquisition and advertising, customer relationship management, and customer support might not be as well defined. The composable data strategy is built on 4 pillars that flow into each other in a virtuous cycle. First is data creation, which might not be the central focus of a CDP, but it's a crucial requirement. Instead of just treating data as exhaust from business operations, we need to align data creation with CDP requirements. And Simon can help clarify these requirements and offers several out-of-the-box data creation capabilities, but additionally, we'll often recommend best-in-class partners like Snowplow to optimize this stage of the data strategy. The next pillar is data centralization, which is about more than just moving data into a cloud data warehouse like Snowflake. It's about ensuring that all your relevant data, whether it's customer behavior, transactional records, or marketing interactions, is aggregated in a way that supports your broader data strategy. And that means that the CDW will function as a centralized hub that enables better governance, easier access, and a stronger foundation for downstream applications. Next is data modeling, which involves 2 critical components. One is your organization-wide data model, and then there's another that is a more specific customer model specific to your CDP's success. And the challenge is to create a data model that serves as a compatible, transparent adapter between your complex business model and the more focused model needed for the CDP. What this does is ensure that the CDP can effectively support high-value data applications without being locked in to a rigid or incompatible framework. And then lastly is where the real power of the composable CDP emerges in data applications. These include everything from retention and acquisition to relationship management and support. But by using a composable approach, you can adapt that data model to fit the specific needs of the applications while ensuring that data and insights generated are fed back into data creation and your centralization process. So on your own, you'd typically create centralized model data, but with a composable CDP, it can play a crucial role in adapting your data model to meet the specific needs of the high-value downstream applications. And it ensures that the valuable data from those applications is captured and fed back into your data creation process, data that might otherwise be missed without a CDP integrating your marketing, advertising, and support teams into the overall data strategy. And so you can't power meaningful use cases with raw data alone. It needs to be adapted into those downstream applications. But in a traditional CDP, the modeling work is typically done only after exporting data into the CDP itself, which makes it specific to CDP use cases and effectively locks in the data, preventing it from being used beyond the CDP. By contrast, in a composable CDP, all the data is in the cloud data warehouse, which makes it a unified data hub where all the data, whether it's incoming raw events or outgoing segment memberships, remains centralized within the cloud data warehouse. And that permits flexible utilization because it's all housed in the CDW. It's not locked into specific applications or use cases. So it's adaptable and accessible for a wide range of applications, from core CDP use cases to advanced analytics, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and beyond. And further, it's seamlessly integrated. With our composable architecture, modeling and enrichment work happens inside of the CDW, enabling the same data sets that power various applications to be used elsewhere without duplicating any effort or data. So the differentiated value of Simon's composable architecture lies in its flexibility. You can perform all of the modeling work within the CDW. And that allows you to leverage your data not only for CDP use cases, but for broader organizational needs, breaking free of the traditional limitations of traditional CDPs. Later in the presentation, we're going to dig more into how a composable CDP works, and that will illustrate, hopefully, the significant value that it can bring to your data strategy. But now I want to hit a note on the most critical aspect of a composable data strategy, which is the data applications. These are really what unlocks the data that you've centralized in the cloud data warehouse. And as I said earlier, some data applications are more immediately accessible given the state of the tooling ecosystem around the CDW and the traditional team structure and skills composition within your organization. For instance, your data science team is likely deeply embedded in your Snowflake instance, and they're not only directly accessing your data through SQL, but their traditional workbench of Jupyter notebooks, controlling and evaluating predictive models, seamlessly slots into the CDW via capabilities like Python for Snowpark and Snowflake's baked-in supportive tools like notebooks and data frames. You've likely given them deep access to Snowflake, a compute budget, maybe even governance training, or specific tooling workshops to further enable their interaction with your data. But beyond BI and predictive modeling, there are additional high-valued applications that are crucial to the composable data strategy. They often fall under the purview of marketing, advertising, or customer engagement teams. Those are things like segmentation, where we're creating precise customer segments based on centralized data, enabling targeted marketing efforts that resonate more strongly with specific audiences. And it essentially, by locating the segmentation within the CDW, it ensures that those segments are consistent across all your platforms and channels. Personalization helps you deliver very personalized, tailored experiences at scale, utilizing all of your customer data in the CDW. And it's driven by accurate, up-to-date profiles that reflect the latest customer interactions and which ensure relevance. Activation is really where we take the customer segments and sync them into various channels, ensuring that campaigns are data-driven and optimized for performance. It leverages a lot of the real-time capabilities of the CDW, ensuring that the data is fresh. And lastly, there's orchestration, where we're coordinating complex multi-channel customer journeys that are responsive to real-time data in the CDW. In utilizing the composable CDP here ensures that all the customer interactions are harmonized, which makes a more seamless experience across touch points. So having explored the various data applications essential for leveraging centralized data, now we're going to dig deeper into the concept of data composability. This idea is foundational to understanding how a composable CDP not only enhances these applications, but also revolutionizes the way your organization harnesses data for strategic advantage. It's about creating a flexible, scalable, and interconnected data environment where components like sources, models, and applications can be easily assembled and reassembled to meet your evolving business needs. So in this next part, we're going to explore how a composable CDP embodies these principles to maximize the value of your data investments. But first, let's dive specifically into the notion of data composability. It's really the data-centric counterpart to application composability. It's akin to how composable commerce leverages the mock architecture of microservices, API-first development, cloud-native SaaS, and headless services. And it emphasizes the interactions of data applications built directly on top of your cloud data warehouse architecture. It also fundamentally exposes data back to an organization through a traditionally CDP managed lifecycle, rather than internally processing the data opaquely and then exporting it into downstream marketing channels. A data composable approach allows an organization to power additional, potentially non-CDP use cases from each stage of its data processing, as well as to keep the data within the CDW throughout more of the process. And it follows these principles. In terms of data proximity, the data predominantly remains in the CDW, which minimizes data movement. Most of the applications are actually bringing compute to the data rather than transferring data to the compute environment, which enhances both efficiency and security. It's designed in a modular fashion, utilizing a pipeline structure that consists of a series of logical modular stages that each one has a bounded context with a strong interface. And that modularization ensures clear separation of concerns and facilitates easier management and scalability. There's end-to-end integration where composability extends from data modeling through the data applications back into the capture of data that they're generating. And that comprehensive approach really ensures a continuous loop of data utilization enhancement. And then there's cross-organization accessibility. Since data is accessible at all stages of processing and modeling, it enables a wide range of cross-organizational use cases. And that openness allows for greater collaboration and innovation across and between your different departments. And then lastly, there's extensible utilization. Because the data is exposed at various stages, data composability supports extensible uses ranging from advanced analytics and machine learning to real-time decision-making and operational reporting. Now, the way that that's different from a traditional SaaS CDP is that in those environments, data is often exported to and then processed in a separate system, which essentially limits its visibility and your control over the data. These platforms typically use a closed environment for processing, and scalability is really dependent on the provider's capabilities, which might not always align with your organization's growth or your needs. Conversely, a data composable CDP is utilizing the cloud data warehouse architecture to keep data centralized and secure within your cloud environment. So this approach not only reduces costs associated with data movement, but it also enhances security by leveraging cloud native protections. And the flexibility of integration and customization allows businesses to tailor the system to their specific requirements, which promotes a more effective and efficient use of the data. And then furthermore, the data composable model provides unparalleled transparency into the data operations, giving organizations complete oversight of how data is handled, transformed, and utilized. This really opens up data access at all stages, coupled with the ability to scale effortlessly using cloud resources, and sets a composable CDP apart from traditional models. Now, in terms of how this is different than reverse ETL, the reverse ETL vendors can provide you with a head start and tooling that lets you put together stages more quickly. However, you'll find their view is limited to how the components work and maybe some illustrative recipes for integrating components into a use case, but it tends to lack a broader strategic view of your whole ecosystem. They're placing the burden of composability on the user, requiring significant tech skills such as SQL expertise or integration know-how. And that can make it acceptable for simpler data tasks, but when you encounter increasingly complex and labor-intensive situations for more sophisticated data scenarios. By contrast, the composable CDP is inherently designed to ensure data composability across various stages of data handling without requiring its end users to possess deep technical skills. Thanks to largely no-code interfaces and AI-assisted functionality, the composable CDP effectively democratizes data access, allowing users from various backgrounds to effectively engage with data. And the approach not only simplifies operations, but also specifically supports critical business functions like marketing, advertising, customer support, and makes it highly relevant and tailored to those domains. Moreover, while reverse ETL can sometimes struggle with more complex data requirements, composable CDPs are explicitly optimized to handle intricate data scenarios. And this ensures that even the most challenging data workflows are streamlined and efficient, minimizing the effort from the user side and maximizing the business value extracted from the data. So there's several key benefits to data composability. There's cross-org utility, where each module in the pipeline is designed with a bounded context and ensures that the interaction between the modules are well-defined and manageable. And that design allows different departments within your organization to tap into the data pipeline more effectively. So for instance, your data science team can make marketing user access marketing user profiles or behavioral data sets to enhance their model training. And they can apply insights that are gained not only within marketing strategies, but across the various operational realms of your organization. In terms of security and governance, your organization maintains complete control over the security and governance. The control extends to defining who can access the data and what actions they can perform on it. And as the data all remains in your CDW, you're leveraging the inherent security protocols and compliance measures of your cloud environment, just enhancing your overall protection of your data assets. The components in this logical data pipeline are swappable. So due to that inherent modularity, each stage of the data pipeline is its own distinct module, which lets you customize your setup by selecting the best components suited to your particular needs, whether they're provided by your CDP vendor or whether they're sourced from leading technologies in the ecosystem or whether you develop them in-house. It doesn't only foster innovation, but it ensures your data architecture can evolve without having to have disruptive overhauls. And then one of the primary advantages of data composability is the significant cost savings. By keeping data within your cloud data warehouse and minimizing replication, you save on storage costs and you reduce operational complexities associated with multiple data copies. So the efficiency is not just financial, it's also temporal, because you don't need to spend the time to create the replicas and transfer them around the internet. So now I've gone into great depth on the theory of data composability, and I want to actually consider exactly how far from this reality pragmatically we land. This diagram lays out some of the concepts in a simple pipeline structure that I've been using to describe data composability, with the boxes being the stages of data processing and the arrows representing data interfaces between each. But of course, reality is more complex. In reality, there's a good deal of other domain concepts and more sophisticated interactions between the stages of data processing. One strong advantage of selecting a composable CDP to begin powering these data applications is that you draw upon the CDP's applications as well as the data side artifacts that drive them. And of course, Simon has expertise derived from being in market for years and supporting use cases across a wide range of business models at all stages of data maturity. We partner with our clients in a way that goes beyond simply integrating the CDP and instead focuses on your broader composable data strategy. One of the primary reasons to look to a composable CDP to handle your data applications is there's likely a very similar structure in your upstream business model. Though you can likely describe the overall business model quite succinctly, growing and scaling a business leads to complexities as your product and your service offerings proliferate and your customer base expands in volume, geography, and more. So hand selecting the components that best fit your organization from those offered by a composable CDP really lets you direct your time, effort, and focus to the more unique and valuable aspects of your business, while ensuring that you have proper downstream structure to enable your marketing, advertising, and support teams. And electing a composable CDP means that as you have need of new capabilities, you have a starting point with that suite of components, so you're never starting from scratch. So in much the same way that data composable approach keeps data in the cloud data warehouse for easy access by the rest of your organization, the data from the rest of the organization is also more easily accessible by the composable CDP. There's no need to establish any kind of heavyweight ETL process to get it there. So gone are the notions of SQL traits or linked audiences that take a data backfill and then only update every day thereafter. And there's no data refresh for either the customer data or the non-customer data because it becomes available as soon as it lands in the CDW. So in the data composable approach, including non-customer data is a simple matter of joining tables, which can be done throughout this logical data composable pipeline, whether it be in modeling, segmentation, or personalization. And obviously, care must be taken not to introduce undue or unsupported dependencies between the composable pipeline stages in order to violate bounded context of the interfaces. So what we do is provide a high-level guidance for data modeling that's not onerous or inflexible, but it ensures that it's compatible with your business model and structured just enough to maintain downstream composability. So we divide the world into 4 categories of inbound data. Identity data can essentially arise from anywhere in the org. And it really all it's doing is providing associations between contact identifiers. It's treated specially and put through rigorous entity resolution in order to cleanse and deduplicate it due to the sensitivity of identity resolution on bad data. And additionally, identity resolution is a special modeling process that not only ensures a model is tailored to marketing, advertising, and support use cases, but it goes through a rigorous QA process and a version deployment framework before it gets used by the downstream pipeline, which we'll go into in more detail in our demo later. But what it really does is that it enables you to then model your contact properties and contact events, which are subdivided into these 2 different types of data, essentially just the difference being that one is one-to-one to your identities and one is many-to-one to your identities. The profiles within Simon are logical. They're only assembled and materialized on an as-needed basis. But several data applications like trait syncing, for example, is going to materialize the profile and then monitor it for changes over time. And that cornerstone of the profile really is the identity model, which is why it receives such elevated treatment. And then lastly, non-contact data can be joined to the contact profile on any property, not just contact identifiers like contact data. That permits use cases like enrichment of the profile with external data that could range from product listing details, fulfillment data, and more. And it's generally very use case or campaign specific in its application. So the structure and information in this data model is provided to Simon through our identity resolution product and our schema explorer. And it basically amounts to the user providing Simon with enough metadata to power the downstream data applications appropriately. Those applications are where we truly begin to unlock the value of the data in Snowflake. So now that we've covered data composability in depth, I want to switch gears and I want to specifically discuss how Simon unlocks the value of your data. We do this through a number of techniques in the composable CDP. We use logical and physical pipelining, as we've been discussing extensively, end-to-end from data creation through the data applications and back again. And when we're building out each of the stages, we're aggressively transparent about the inputs, the outputs, and all the functionality in between, because we want to allow our clients to reach into these stages and tap into the data at all points in their processing. And when we build our components, we do so with an eye towards backwards and forward compatibility in order to allow clients to build upon the stages just as we do. So we have a number of examples of this, ranging from versioned identity deployment framework to the way that we've built a forwards compatible schema in our segment views that we'll get into later in the demo. And lastly, we use least common denominator SQL constructs when we're building these data applications rather than fringe CDW specific capabilities. So for instance, the vast majority of constructs that we're managing are tables and views, ensuring portability and compatibility across the widest range of tools in your organization. But specific to Snowflake, when we need change data capture, we utilize streams and tasks rather than the higher level capability like dynamic tables. Again, because we're looking to the most portable and accessible solution to our problems. All right, so now I'd like to show, not tell you, how the composable CDP works using a demo. So I'm going to give you what I call my inside out demo, with the emphasis really being on how the composable data applications work in Snowflake, not as much on the applications themselves in the Simon product. And so to do that, I'm just going to select a few representative data apps to walk you through, since going into detail on all of them is going to be beyond the scope of the webinar. But let's start by taking a look at our sandbox account in Snowflake. This contains all of our demo accounts as well as integration testing accounts. And what I'm going to do is drill into the database that backs our demo. So in particular, what you'll notice here is that we've organized this database into various schema. There is one which essentially acts as the gateway to all the rest of your data in your cloud data warehouse for input. And then there's what we call the data routing schema, where Simon is actually creating and centralizing data on your behalf. So Simon's writing into this particular schema as it collects data that is unique to it. Then there are application-specific schemas, which we're going to drill into in a lot more detail. And then lastly, there is a write schema where Simon can produce data and write it back out from the internal operations of all these various data applications. Some of these apps are relatively stateless, as for example, segmentation. The constructs that you'll see inside of that are just views. And so we'll go into more detail in terms of the no-code builder that's used to compose these views, ranging to apps like identity, which is a much more stateful process that we'll cover in a little bit more detail in a moment. But this is effectively just the back end of Simon's data applications. And the focus is really much more on managing objects inside of the cloud data warehouse and less on explicit ETL into downstream systems. So let's kick it off by taking a look at the user interface for identity. Like I said earlier, identity is core for adapting your business model into your CDP contact profile. And what it really does is it gathers together identifier associations from across your organization, like user profiles, loyalty programs, lead lists, point of sale records, and combines all those things together to create a stable identifier that's really what's used to identify individuals in the downstream data applications. So as I click through here, you can see that I'm running through what the form that's exposed to an end user to actually configure that identity resolution process. And they're given all manner of options in terms of defining the rules which allow rows and input data sets to be combined into one particular identity, as well as survivorship rules, which really define like which identifiers become the primary or enabled identifiers for a given identity when merges and identities occur. So the way that this is going to be accessible in your downstream data applications is essentially through identifier mappings that are both useful to map identifiers from within your organization into downstream channel identifiers and vice versa. And then, like I mentioned earlier, the way that an identity model is actually deployed into the account is via a versioned system that allows you to deeply QA the identity model before it's actually deployed into your downstream data applications. So now I'm going to jump back into the actual back end of identity and call out the outputs to begin with. So really the central output is going to be this resolved identities table. You can see there's the stable identifier of your Simon ID that was created by the identity resolution process. And then there's a number of aggregations that are applied to the various identifiers, which effectively represent your survivorship rules. In addition to this, you're given a audit table, which effectively annotates all of the inbound raw records with the Simon ID that they're allocated to. So it gives you the ability to determine what inputs have gone into building a particular identity. And then lastly, backing up all the way to the input, the identity source union is where you take all those various data sets that we selected via the no-code interface and combine them together into a sparse union before where they're fed into a deterministic connected components algorithm to really define that stable identifier for each merged identity. So like I say, the core algorithm here is deterministic connected components. And in this particular case, identity needs to be deterministic for marketing and support use cases. It's less critical that it be deterministic for advertising or analytical purposes. But the way that these two things are combined together in Simon is that our entity resolution offering is probabilistic and our identity resolution offering is deterministic. And we're looking ahead to the future to even decouple entity resolution from identity resolution and offer it more broadly as a generic data modeling application. Awesome. So the next step I want to jump into is segmentation. So this is the no-code form that a marketer is presented with when defining and divvying up context for more targeted messaging and analytical purposes. So as you can see here, any attribute of the logical contact profile is available for segmentation or anything that can be joined onto the profile. So in this case, we're using a predictive input around second purchase propensity that's a property of the profile, as well as business rules that are also properties of the profile, and they're encoded in a separate segment. And then we're joining that to behavioral event data. In this case, the way that we're defining a disengaged but likely to submit a second purchase user as one that's not engaging with email events recently. So now jumping to what that looks like inside of our application, this manifests as a view. And so you can see here that we have purchase propensity, we have membership in that separate segment, and then we have aggregation that occurs over the event table of the email events. And so this relatively elaborate SQL query was generated for a non-technical user using that no-code interface that we saw earlier. The key point here is just really that we enable a non-technical business owner both to generate these views and to QA them. And that QA process is done through metrics computed over the top of the audiences, both over time and instantaneously, so they can just verify that they've actually defined the correct audience that they're looking for. All right, and then lastly, I want to take a peek into activation. So activation is really where we're allowing a marketer, advertiser, or support rep to publish data out of the cloud data warehouse and into downstream channels. And then once it's been published, to keep it in sync as data changes over time. So I have two illustrations of that. One, in this particular case, we're keeping a list defined by our high LTV customer segment in sync in a downstream Klaviyo channel. And you can see the way that this is synced over time. And then two is utilizing syncing of traits. And this really allows us to not only export contact properties from the cloud data warehouse, but again, as they change over time, keep them in sync with the downstream Klaviyo user profile as the data actually updates. So jumping back into the back end of this particular application, we can see that for some constructs like lists, these can be just relatively simple views, and they're easy to keep in sync, just utilizing instantaneous membership as well as personalizations that are joined into that membership here. But for the trait syncing that I showed earlier, we actually create a stream over a transient table, which we've built to actually monitor the data for changes over time. And so this is a way of just effectively streaming those changes downstream into the event-driven update endpoint of the user profile. So in both of these cases, though, what can be done is that an organization can actually just subscribe to these data constructs, and then they can observe the data that's actually powering the downstream activation from their cloud data warehouse. So that concludes my tour here. And then just in terms of wrapping up, we spoke through a composable data strategy, went into the details of what data composability is, and then lastly, I wound up showing you specifically how Simon implements this to unlock value from your data. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions if there are any from the audience.
Matt, it looks like we've got one here. Question is, if we're just getting started with the cloud data warehouse and know we need to add a CDP, what should be part of our initial consideration?
Absolutely. Yeah. So one strong advantage of establishing this like pipeline of the different data applications within a composable CDP is that you don't have to flesh out all of the data at once. So one strategy that we like to employ is working backwards from the data that you actually need to power downstream high valued, especially marketing campaigns. And so what you can do there is take some consideration around your identity model, because that's a more sensitive construct that needs to really map to your concept of a user in your business. And then beyond that, incrementally add new attributes, new behaviors, new events as they become available or needed downstream in your actual marketing applications. And so that can kind of provide a framework where you start small and then you build it up by composing it from those various data types that that I overviewed earlier in terms of the models that Simon supports. And this is all very easy to do as long as you're in a incremental and additive mode. Where things become a little bit more challenged is where you may need to change data that you've already ingested into your CDP. And in that case, there's mechanisms for you to essentially, verify whether or not data is in use downstream. And then if it is, you have to be careful with things like destructive changes. And so we give you observability tooling, QA tooling, in order to try to make those changes as safely as possible. But really, as you're ramping up with your cloud data warehouse, you're largely in an additive mode, and so you can move very, very quickly.
All right, I think that's a wrap. Well, thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Matt, for speaking to this composable data strategy. It was very insightful information. Thank you for everyone attending. As always, you will get a recording of this webinar so that you can, refer to it anytime that you need. And we really appreciate you coming out today to listen to our webinar. Thanks so much.
Thank you all.